Let's go ahead and kick off Chapter 1 and talk about the ACR6 user interface. Now, the user interface is largely unchanged since prior versions. We've got some new panels that we'll talk about in just a second, but for the most part, if you're already familiar with Camera Raw or you've used it in the past, you're going to be instantly familiar with Camera Raw 6. But for those who are new, let's go ahead and take a quick overview of what we got here. Now, starting at the top left, you'll see that we have a row of tools across the top of the user interface. This is the equivalent of Photoshop's toolbar. So everything works in pretty much the same way. We've got shortcuts for different tools, such as the hand tool. If we press the letter H, that will select the tool. We can click on any of them. And if any of them have a little arrow that you see here, you can just click and hold, and you'll see in this case different options that are sort of buried within that tool. So rather than having different tools in the same button, you've got different options that you can use. And we'll talk about these, of course, as we go through each one. So from left to right, we've got a standard zoom tool, a hand tool, which is going to allow us to pan around the document. We've got a white balance tool and a color sampler tool if you're working with a press or other printing technologies where you need to take a specific RGB color sample of a specific point on the document. We've got the targeted adjustment tool, which we're going to talk about in a couple of different segments later on in the training. We've got the crop tool, which you probably already know how to use that. We've got a straighten tool or a horizon tool that we can use right here. We've also got a spot removal tool, which you can see on some of these we get different options that pop up over here in the toolbar. If I click the different options, sometimes we're going to get just the panels, and sometimes we'll get different options for the tool itself. So you'll want to pay attention to that as you're going through. We have a red eye removal tool, which you also probably are familiar with from Photoshop and other apps. We have an adjustment brush that we mentioned earlier, and this is one of the more important ones, and we're going to dedicate a whole segment to this and show you how to make localized corrections in different parts of the image. Same deal with the graduated filter. And this is actually a shortcut for the preferences. Rather than have only tools on the toolbar, we also have some option for preferences, image rotation, and the ability to mark something for deletion. So we're going to talk about the preferences in the next segment, but it's important to know you can access those just by clicking this button right here. We also have the ability to preview all of our changes. So if I switch back to the panels, no matter which panel we're on, if we click this preview, it's basically going to take the cumulative effect of all the different edits that we've applied to that point and preview them. So it's a little bit less flexible than what we have in Lightroom, where we can go through panel by panel and turn the preview on or off for each one. In ACR, it's basically an all or nothing proposition. Now, for the purposes of this video, I won't be using it, but this button right here to the right of the preview can basically zoom ACR out into a full screen mode where you don't have any distracting elements around, and it will automatically, just size itself to the resolution that you're using. At the top right here, we have a histogram, which you're probably familiar with the general concept. We also have some clipping warnings that we can use with the histogram. And we'll be talking more about sort of integrating the histogram in these clipping previews as we go through our different edits. We have some information about the file itself right here under the histogram. So we've shot this at f2.8 ISO 200 and so on. So you can get some good metadata right there. And then, of course, the panels that we've mentioned already a couple of times are located across the screen right here. And again, all you have to do is click on any of these to just open up the controls in the panel area. We also have a pop-out menu here that can give us some extra options when we're working with our files. For example, if we wanted to jump back to the original settings that we were using, we could click on this Camera Raw Defaults option. If we finished editing a file and we open up another file that's exactly the same and we want to use the same corrections, we can use this previous correction option to just apply everything right there on the fly. And then we've got some other options, again, that we'll talk about as we go through. Down at the bottom here, we have different options for opening or closing the images, or actually just accepting the changes without opening them. So open image obviously will take the shot in the current state and open it into Photoshop. Cancel will close the image. And done will actually take the changes that we've made and just apply them to the metadata, but not open the file in Photoshop. If you hold down the Alt key, you'll get a couple different options here. One is to reset everything that you've done with all the edits. Another is to open a copy of this file in Photoshop. Now we also have up here, just to the top left of the Open Image button, you'll see that we have a little scroller that allows us to move through our selection of thumbnails. So if I click on these buttons, it's basically going to jump from one image to the next. Down at the bottom center, we have our workflow options, and we'll talk about these in more detail. These allow us to set up how we're going to output our file, what kind of color profile we're going to use, how many bits per channel, the resolution, and even some output sharpening. Down here at the bottom left, we also have standard zoom controls that you're probably familiar with from other Photoshop dialogues. And we have the image scroller here, and the way that you open multiple images into Camera Raw is that you go to the File menu in Photoshop, and when you choose Open, just select multiple RAW files, and they will all appear in this little film strip-like area. Finally, we have the Save Image button, which gives us some options for exporting multiple files that we might have open here, including some file naming options, file extensions, different types of formats we can use, and different options within the different formats. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good overview of where to find everything when you're working in Camera Raw. It's really a pretty straightforward user interface. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the next segment, which is the preferences.